Your pace changes, your eyes move to their hands. A quiet calculation runs somewhere beneath your conscious thought. You might call this caution. You might call it instinct. But the real answer is far stranger than either of those words suggests. What you just experienced is a stranger detection system that has been running, unmodified, for roughly 300,000 years. It doesn't know about police, or surveillance cameras, or crowded sidewalks full of people who mean you no harm. It only knows one thing. An unknown human is a variable, and variables can kill you. To understand why, you have to go back to the world your body still thinks it's living in. For most of human history, you didn't meet new people very often. Anthropologist Dunbar spent decades studying the size of human social groups, and his research points to a strikingly consistent number. Across hunter-gatherer societies, tribal communities, and even modern friendship networks, the number of people a person can maintain stable, meaningful relationships with hovers around 150. That number has a name now. Researchers call it Dunbar's number. 150 people. That was roughly the size of the world you were built for. Everyone in it had a face you recognized, a voice you'd heard before, a place in the web of trust your ancestors carried in their heads. Outside that circle, there was almost nothing. No internet, no newspapers, no strangers passing through on their way to somewhere else. If you saw an unfamiliar face, it meant something was happening, and usually that something was not good. A stranger in ancestral terms could mean a rival group scouting your territory. It could mean someone fleeing trouble, bringing that trouble with them. It could mean a person whose intentions, food sources, and alliances you simply had no information about. In a world without language barriers solved by translation apps, without ID cards, without any way to verify a person's history, the only safe assumption was vigilance. So your brain built a shortcut. Psychologist Susan Fiske, who has spent much of her career studying social cognition, found that the brain processes unfamiliar faces differently than familiar ones, almost instantly categorizing them along two axes. How trustworthy does this person seem, and how capable are they of causing harm? This isn't a slow, deliberate judgment. It happens within a fraction of a second, often before you're even aware you've made an assessment. Think about that for a moment. Before you've heard a stranger's voice, before they've said a single word, some part of you has already run the numbers. This wasn't laziness, it was efficiency born of necessity. A brain that took its time evaluating every unfamiliar face in detail would have been a brain perpetually behind the threat curve. The brains that survived were the ones that made a fast, rough judgment and adjusted only if new information demanded it. Here's where the story gets even stranger. Your discomfort around strangers isn't just about danger. It's also about unpredictability itself. Researcher Robert Zayonk, working decades ago on what's now called the mere exposure effect, found something almost embarrassingly simple. People rate unfamiliar stimuli, including faces, as less likable than familiar ones, purely because they are unfamiliar. Repetition alone increases liking. You don't need a reason to dislike a stranger. Unfamiliarity itself is enough to register, faintly, as risk. This is why a coworker you barely know can feel mildly uncomfortable to sit next to, while a coworker you've shared 100 lunches with feels almost like family, even if neither relationship is particularly close. Your brain isn't measuring how nice someone is, it's measuring how known they are. And known, to your ancestors, meant safe enough to stop watching so closely. Now picture what a single day looks like for you, here, now. You might pass dozens, maybe hundreds of strangers on a commute. You might sit in a waiting room with people you'll never see again. You might scroll through comment sections filled with usernames attached to no face at all. Every single one of these encounters quietly pings the same ancient detection system. Unknown, human, assess risk, stay alert. Multiply that by every stranger you pass in a single day, and you start to understand something important about modern fatigue that has nothing to do with physical exhaustion. Your nervous system was built for a world with maybe a few new faces a year. It is now processing more unfamiliar humans before breakfast than your ancestors might have encountered in a lifetime. This is what researchers studying urban psychology have started calling stranger overload, though the more academic term is social density stress. Living in a dense, anonymous environment forces your ancient threat assessment system to run constantly on a target list that was never emhroed samem. So, which is it? Are strangers a threat your body is hardwired to track, or noise your body has learned to tune out? The answer, like most things about your ancient operating system, is both, depending on the data available. A single stranger on an empty street gives your brain enough isolated specific information to run its old threat assessment program in full. 100 strangers on a crowded train gives it too much information, none of it specific enough to act on, so it shuts the program down instead and treats the crowd as scenery. Neither response is irrational. Both are exactly what a system built for small, stable groups of about 150 people would do when confronted with a world of millions of unfamiliar faces. There's a quieter implication buried in all of this. The discomfort you feel meeting new people, the social anxiety that spikes before a party full of strangers, the relief you feel when a friend of a friend turns out to be a mutual connection, all of it traces back to the same ancient math. Known is safe. Unknown is a question mark. And your ancestors paid attention to question marks because the ones who didn't often didn't survive long enough to pass that carelessness on. You are not paranoid for noticing a stranger. You are not antisocial for feeling drained after a day full of unfamiliar faces. You are running an assessment system built for a world of 150 people, deployed into a world of 8 billion, and somehow, most days, it still mostly works. You're walking down an empty street at night. A stranger appears ahead, walking towards you, and somewhere underneath your conscious mind, 300,000 years of careful, quiet vigilance is simply doing its job.